get we'll have our recording online in our library at the appropriate time. So I want to welcome you here to Gov School. My name is Mark, and I'm one of the founders of Gov Directions. And this is a part of our summer series, a summer school series that we've been having, hosted initially by Professor Chris Hanks. And Professor Hanks is a professor of entrepreneurship, and he's been leading us as we're going through. And we started our second sort of the experiential part of this with Cynthia Harper. Dr. Harper talked to us about branding, communication capabilities, and that's online in our recording. And then we heard once again back from Professor Hanks, and then we had Danielle Miller. He talked to us about teaming and certifications, and that's also a recording available. And this is the third in the experiential series part, and this is our Gov School focus. And what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about particular topics that our membership needs in order to be successful in government. We know that if we help you learn a little bit more, then you're going to win more. We generally do this particular session every first and third Monday. This is going to be the last session for a while, and we'll start back up in September at a different time slot. So we've brought a lot of people through this particular series, and we know that people generally, while you may not enjoy it, it is a helpful session, and we want to talk to you today. And I'll kind of give you the summary in just a minute. That is the 101 government, refreshing our memory about government, help talk about contracting instruments, capability statements, and so on. Our library will host this session afterwards. So if you leave today and not going to be upset or anything, you're going to come back in the library and drop down to our summer school, and then you can listen to the session we've already actually done, and then our fifth one and sixth one will be here, what Professor Hanks did just the other day, and then the sixth one will be our Gov School focus. We'll come back with our session 7, and that's going to be the end of this summer series. We also have some others that are readily available for you, and if you ever get a chance, read about the RFP and spend resources for those ones. I do, just as a reminder.
Hello? Sam from Harviller.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2. Okay.
It is helpful to maintain your mute status unless you have a question. And if you have a question, raise your hand and then I'll call on you, and then we can do that. We also have a chat room, but we will maintain the mute status. Okay. And if you have a question, you can ask a question in the chat room. This just helps for organizational purposes. We found it very helpful. Sometimes we'll get as many as 100 individuals in this room. It's important everybody has the same opportunity to hear. And to undo your mute status, you really have that capability, because we want you to have that, but please maintain it unless you have a specific question. Okay, so this is where this session will be recorded, and it is part of our summer school series. I'll use a PowerPoint to guide our discussion, and we're going to go back and forth with documents that we'll be referring to, as well as website locations that you can use during the session. But as a reminder, Gov Directions, it's located in Atlanta, Georgia. We've been in this sector since 1998, and we serve just over 103,000 companies worldwide. These companies are looking to do business with government, okay, monitoring federal, state, and local. And today what we'll do is focus on government contracting as a whole, and we call this our focus session. And so when you leave here, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge, and then you need to start applying it as you move forward. The first part of this section, we're going to talk about Government 101. Just as a refresher, how does government really work? How are decisions made in the public sector? And then we're going to guide into contracting instruments. These are the instruments that local governments, state agencies, and federal government organizations will use to contract with you. We're going to focus almost 100% on contracts. That is, there's an exchange of money for services or supplies, and or assistance, and not necessarily grants, which is a sort of opposite, where they're providing funds to you, and then there's no expectations except in particular guidance of there. But we're focusing on bids and contracts, sometimes referred to as requests for proposals each year as well. And I'm going to talk you through some of those terminology. We're also going to spend a little time on registrations. What's the ones that are most important? The ones that you're really working with. Capability statements, how important they are in this process. And I'm going to guide you through and give you some examples. pinpointing opportunity. That's really it is the most important part of government contracting. That is finding and bidding on the right contract. Okay, and help you understand how to really find that. We are going to talk about an actual RFP, what to look for, how to read one, tell you how to go about pricing using your performance research, how to actually respond to one, and we'll show you a real live one that I did. And then we're going to show you evaluation and reward and how you actually win. The one that I'm going to show you today is one that I did not win. I would, and I think it's sometimes more helpful to learn from the ones we fell out than the ones we actually are successful at. Personally, my own background, I've been in this sector for 30 years. I've won over 400 contracts in 34 states, primarily at the local government level. I typically research areas in compensation and human resource management, and that is my specialty and my expertise. We started Gov Directions and grown it to where it's at now. We've served the sector specifically for 20 years with a site like ours, aggregation. It was really kind of developed as a way to really find new opportunities for my business interests from consulting. Over time, I've worked with governments and also serve as a professor in bids and contracting at a major university in a top program in the graduate program for public administration. So I teach how government officials how to write RFPs and how to manage the contracting. But today what we're going to do is reverse that. And I'm going to talk to you about how to deal with them and how to understand what they're asking for. So that's who we are and how we're going to help you today. Just as the government 101, this is a $4.5 trillion marketplace. That's the normal process. The last year and a half has not been so normal. There's been an additional $6 trillion in appropriations that have been pumped in to deal with COVID-19 and also to enhance our abilities to maintain our economy and more of a stimulus type package. And there, even as we talk today, there's debate at the federal level between a 1.2 to 6 trillion in additional dollars to potentially be pumped into our economy in the near-term future with governments contracting with the private marketplace. At Gov Directions, we try not to get involved with all the hand wringing, the sausage making, how these decisions are really made, and stay away from the politics. But once it becomes an appropriation and there's going to be funds attached to it, we think our members need to be the ones that win that. So we work to help you to get in the capacity where you actually can win that contract. And so oftentimes we'll do some publications. We have a blog, the govdirections.com blog. And if you go to, we don't ever advertise this, but we may drive you to stories where we've actually talked about legislation and others, and to help explain to you how something actually works, where you should be, where you're at in the process of that money hitting your bank account potentially through a contract. And we also refer to the resolutions and the appropriation documents that you need to be aware of. When we do that, we focus not on the, once again, on the politics of it, but the Congressional Budget Office. This is the official nonpartisan briefing that every member of Congress would get. And so you can go in and you can learn more about an individual appropriation. I'll just click on that one, and you can go in and review the documents, and we'll summarize for you where those monies flow. And when we look at this, what we focus in on, not necessarily, like this HR 748 was a appropriation for direct payments to U.S. individuals. We didn't focus on that part. We focused on the actual appropriation for items. So like hospitals in HR 266 received $75 billion specifically to go in and deal with expanded COVID-19 testing and also to replenish supplies that they were out there working with. And so what we would focus in on is, they need tents, they need vials for medicines, they need hotels for individuals that are moving around the country. So we're looking at the contracting part as opposed to the policies part of it or other parts of it that really have concerned us and driving those out. And then, of course, the most recent one that was passed is early this year, so $350 billion that has been pushed into state and local governments. And that bill was a total of $1.9 trillion. That $350 billion is being used specifically to hire contractors at the state and local government level. These bids are not appearing in SAM, SAM.gov, which is only the federal government. These are ones coming out in the local newspapers or coming out in the local government website, the state agencies, and our tribal governments. So we'll make sure that you're familiar with those. Okay. And so you can go through any of these at any given time and read those. So why is this important? Because, when you look at all the governments that we have in the United States, here's the 2012 census that was been published. They do the census on the 2010, 2020, but the information really doesn't flow to 2 years later. We're still waiting for the 2022, and it's going to be even more fragmented. Okay, governments, we like to create a lot of government to provide the services that we need to oversee it in the United States. And you look over here in the far bottom corner, you'll see the individual types of governments, and there's a small type, so you can't read that, but it's saying there's cities, there's counties, there's housing authorities, there's economic development authorities, and it's showing you all those by state. And so there's a lot of them. Every one of these is a layer. Just to illustrate the fragmentation, okay? Governments don't like to work together. They're not ever going to like to work together. And I'm going to explain that to you because they're really in a decision-making arena where they like to be the ones to make the decisions. The city council wants to control how the money's spent in that city. The county commissioner wants to control the money spent in that county. The hospital authority is really the only kind of really power we give to these officials who spend all their time and volunteer for us is the ability to know where they're going to spend money. And they like to control that, so it's not likely to ever be removed from them. And so we have some 35,000 plus cities and towns. They're probably going to be probably about 37,000 in new census. 3,031 counties. Counties are more defined. That's pretty much it. School systems, I bet it's going to approach 17,000 school districts. We like to use new forms of school systems. Not only do you have like a county, it's more traditional independent school district or county, but now we're seeing school charter systems that may even be governments that run just one school as opposed to a big district. And so, but all of them really get that money from us as taxes. They got to show that buy-in. They got to have a participatory system. And then special districts. We like to use special districts, hospital systems, airports, economic development districts, water and sewer districts, and so on. Oftentimes, these governments are formed by other governments who come together, and then they may be a council of governments that offer a service in an area like an airport, or even a quasi-government relationship, public and private, where maybe doctors come together with a county in order to offer a small hospital, for example, and so that they can tap into the federal dollars. But all of that governed though locally, fragmented, not broken. So I use a puzzle to really illustrate how we at GovDirections take the fragmentation. You pick up that puzzle box, there are thousands of pieces sometimes. And then you start assembling and put it together and it makes sense. And that's what we do for our members. So every day that information flows into GovDirections and we then match that to you. And then we send the actual calls for bids and proposals. So how do those calls get formed? Who makes those decisions in a government? Okay, so there's a traditional policy process where we bring in elected officials who will work with individuals who are specialized or experts in their field, like city managers or human resource directors or finance departments, the public safety, the chief of police, the fire department chief, the recreation department, electric superintendent, and so forth. We'll organize our governments in more professional ways, and then we'll let the mayor and council work on behalf of the citizen of the community to really drive what they're going to do. When they decide they need a new fire, maybe a fire vehicle or pumper, in order to make sure that they have better fire services community, that generally comes from the citizens who are asking the mayor and council to do that. And then they'll ask the manager to look into it, and then they'll ask the fire department to actually organize that process to go out and determine what kind of pumper they want to buy. But then they're going to use this little office, sometimes they're in the finance department, called the purchasing office, to manage that so that they can make sure they get an efficient purchase and that it's done in a way that's legit and within ethical guidelines in a typical community. So that purchasing department is really kind of the first person you normally will have to deal with whenever you're working with a government. And they're there to make sure, all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. And that's their job. Now, the final decision-making person for that fire, for example, might be the chief of public safety or the fire chief. And then they will come back and make a recommendation to the city manager. And then the city manager is going to go to the mayor and council, and they will actually approve a purchase. So it starts at the mayor and council, ends at the mayor and council. They're the ones that are final decision making. In between, you got a person department kind of guides it, and then you have all these individuals involved in the actual decision making. So always getting back, when you're dealing with somebody, you want to deal with that purchasing official. Make sure you get everything done correctly. The hardest thing we find we're working with government is following instructions. So you got to follow instructions. Got to give them exactly what they want. When you get your foot in the door, then you can, be that business person and sell that fire chief. Why your product is the best. And then they're going to be the ones selling you to that mayor council. They're the ones who are, at the end of the day, they're going to probably be the ones recommending. And while they may be the ones finalizing, this is the ones recommending. And a lot of times we think everything's going to be built on low price. It's traditionally not. Governments want to hire you because you can do the job, that you're the best at what you do. They want, just like you and I want to, we want to put a new roof on a house. We want to make sure that roof's going to be there for 20 years, 30 years. And we will make sure it's top notch. That's that fire chief's responsibility. They're there to make that. So they're not always looking solely for low price. And so you got to learn about the evaluation criteria, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But this is a traditional city, counties formed, local governments in general form the same way. Elected, appointed, professional management experts in this subject, okay? Governed by a process. And then you're working through that level, okay? So recognize that whenever a government goes out and is going to buy something, it goes through an elaborate process. Once it gets to that point where it's actually on the street and that person directly is working with it, it's going to happen. You're not wasting your time. Do what they need to do, give them the information they need, and you're going to find success. Okay. Here we get to even a more formalized environment. This is the federal government. Federal government, not as many officials involved. And from an elected standpoint, at Congress, congressional level, they're giving them budgets that are more goal oriented. Sometimes they're more earmarked, and you'll hear that terminology more in the future because they've returned to that process. They're earmarking money specifically. I think I saw the president talking about a bridge in St. Louis this weekend. I mean, it's specific, that money is going to that particular project. So that's somewhat different than we've seen in the last 20 years, where it's more in goals and sessions, and the individual government agencies themselves are sort of helping define that. There, the need is defined. It's defined by generally the agency director, and then it's going through a process of getting entered into a federal system for a requisition. They're going to develop a market research, do a market research. They're going to do some look at qualifications. They're going to evaluate. They're going to go out, and once they decide, yes, we want to go out and not do a single source, or we're actually going to go to a competitive situation, they're going to issue that RFP. Oftentimes I get a question, isn't this already sort of, it's a fix. It's already in. They already know that they're going to hire you. They're going to do. The truth of the matter is, no, that's not the case. Whenever if it goes into a competitive marketplace, it is competitive at that point. That means they haven't already decided, because governments have the ability to go in and do a single sole source, an initial just a justification of a purchase. And they can just do that without ever going into a competitive procurement situation. It's very rare that they can't. Okay, so just know that once you see it and you're able to bid on it, then you got a shot at winning, as long as you're providing the information they need. Because they're going to determine it as a blue section. This is when they're going to sort of get involved. They might take it out. But if it goes into a small business competitive situation, they're going to go through, they're going to create an RFP, they're going to broadcast it. It says FBO on this one, but that's now sam.gov. They're going to release it, and then they're going to get proposals. This is the federal level. The other was state and local. They're broadcasting it on their website, or they're broadcasting in that local newspaper. That was a mortgage, and maybe the mortgage and news. Okay, it's somewhere on their website or something. But here at the federal level, everything is in SAM. Local and state government is not in SAM. Okay, only the federal. It's sometimes the federal money flows to a local government, not in SAM. Okay, SAM's got a purpose. That's not it. Okay, so whenever you're monitoring state and local government contract, where most of us do business, there's 20 state and local contracts for every one federal. Okay, once you move out the defense, if you're working in most industries, you're working with a state and local government, it's not in SAM. Okay, keep that in mind. The ones that are in SAM, though, went through this very elaborate process. There's discussions, and then they determine if they're going to conduct negotiations, more of a request for proposal, where they're asking you to come to the table and talk to them, or they're actually just going to give you the contract, more of an invitation to bid, or a request for a quote, and that's more specific, and they're just going to award you the contract and then you move forward. Once a contract is awarded, then there's going to be a process of making sure you do what you say you want to do. There's going to be that contract administration, and you always want to do that, and then you win more. Okay. This is a traditional chart showing how the flow of contracting occurs at the federal level. That's the way it's supposed to work. The truth of the matter is, there's breakdowns in that. We have regulations that govern all this. Unfortunately, we do, and they have been in place for years. So federal acquisition regulations at acquisition.gov govern our federal. Every state has their own. Every local government has their own book of ordinances. Traditionally, the local governments will fall into state laws. Okay, and so they're all working together. Sometimes you have a more of a home rule authority where the local government's really deciding how they want to do things by themselves. But here's a traditional situation where last year what we found was a supply chain that normally works, and frankly, a lot of us hadn't really thought about a supply chain in the past. Maybe occasionally you ran into a situation where, the fuel prices, there was no fuel for a second, or maybe a hurricane comes through your area and then there's a breakdown just for a few weeks or something. But here we had a significant situation where the supply chain has broken. And in fact, in some field areas, it still hasn't recovered. For example, lumber is one of those right now where there's problems. But it will eventually. I mean, there's process in place, and that's been impacting in a lot of different ways. But I'll show you here is a situation where things just really broke down. And there was a particular situation this time last year where the president did a tweet. This isn't a fault of any individual, but just a process itself, how it did break down, and it didn't work the way it's supposed to. And Buzz News really kind of reported the story, and I love to just kind of share it because it brings in the whole process of how it's supposed to work, how it didn't work, ethics, all kinds of issues at our table, but people really genuinely trying to help in a situation, but then operating outside the rules, and so it created problems. And so the president tweets, start making ventilators, we need ventilators. And then he gets thousands of replies, and one of those specifically was somebody who said, I can do this, I know how to supply ventilators. Call me. So somebody in his state picked up the phone, called this individual, because they were in desperate need of ventilators, and awarded a $69 million contract to a company that never made ventilators before. And then that company wasn't really able to deliver. You can read through this story. It's just very interesting. It just really brings in, they did a good job at BuzzFeed to report this and how it just completely broke down. Money was wired to the company. Company accepted the money. And at this point, they're all in litigation, and somebody's probably ended up going to jail because of the whole process just really completely broke down. So that's why we have all the rules and regulations in place. And so it's important as you walk through any of the contracts, you understand the way it's supposed to work. And now, because we've had some situations where it didn't work the way it's supposed to, they're cracking down on things. So make sure you follow the rules and regulations. The thing to remember about government and working in government is that they're always going to catch up. Okay, the process may slow down, but somebody's going to be held responsible when that contracting award period, and you got to be aware of that. So that's why the contracting instruments themselves are so important, and understanding which ones that you're actually responding to, because when they contract with you, you're the one that's on the line. Okay, and you got to make sure that you understand that, and the government's going to place everything at your requirements, and not necessarily at theirs. They're going to check to make sure you did everything right, but you're going to be the ones responsible. Here's a kind of there's a diagram of all the different levels. Okay, solicitation itself is just generally any request that the government wants to contract with anyone, they've got to issue a solicitation. Sometimes we call these invitations to bids, and other times we use different types of quotes. Okay, in a solicitation itself, that's when they're going to directly contract with you, and you're going to deliver something. Before then, or as opposed to that, they may issue maybe like a special notice. A special notice is there where, yeah, I want you to come and talk to us. There's going to be something different. Maybe there's a business fair. We want to get to know you. We're going to tell you, here's what we plan on doing over the next year. We want you to give us some information about yourself, having that capability statement ready to go, but just something unusual about it, but even still with the ability to actually do a solicitation with you. And then oftentimes a combined solicitation or combined synopsis, where basically they're saying, here's what we're going to do, maybe the future, but we're going to do it right now. Okay, and we're telling you right now that in 30 days, we want a contract done with you. Okay, then we call those combined synopses. The source of salt here, basically, they're looking for someone to respond to them, or they're telling you something that's coming. There's something unusual. They're requesting information from you that you need, that you want to work with them, that you have the products that they're looking for, or they offer the support services that they're seeking. Okay, and they want you to be ready to go with them. But just a general solicitation of interest. At that time, sometimes they actually just pick up the phone and start working with you. Okay, so it's important that you understand that when you respond to those, they're getting ready to buy as well. Okay, and you have that. So you always want to have that capability to be ready to go, and so you can send it out and have that document ready to talk about your company. Pre-solicitation, there it's more complex traditionally, and they're giving you a notice that we're going to do this in 30 days. Get ready, because when we do it, you're only going to have 4 or 5 days to respond. And so they tell you that. Okay, so you can watch for it. It is up there. And justifications, they're talking to you, and they're going to let you know that, yeah, we already kind of know what we want, but we're going to justify it. We'll give you the reason. And if you think if we're wrong, you got to tell us, and you got to do it by a particular deadline. Okay. Most times this is for something unusual. Good example. One time this past year, the press office in the White House was contaminated for COVID, and they had to have somebody clean it overnight. They justified that afternoon. They got somebody in there who specialized in it, and then they issued the justification notice the next day. They'd get it done, and it was handled. So it's something unusual and compelling. And they always speak back to FAR. FAR is Federal Acquisition Regulation at acquisition.gov. Okay, so if I went to acquisition.gov, then I can follow FAR. And this is something that's going to be your friend in the federal government. Very simple, easy to use. Every state's going to have something like this at the state level, but this governs any use of federal dollars. And so if they speak to FAR 23, number 2, then you would go 23, 2. This energy and water. I just showed water random here. But it's that simple, push there. And everything that you read in FAR should be easily understood. That's a law. Okay, so there's been a lot of people who have judged it and went through it, and it should be simple to use and understand. So whenever they speak to a particular number or in a reference, then you can just quickly click through and you should go to see what they're talking about. Okay, and so whenever I start referring to FAR, then I'll do that. So here's a sample solicitation. That's just a reminder, any solicitation is going to be any request, submit offers or quotations to the government. Okay, sometimes we just generally just call this an invitation to bid. Sometimes we'll be more negotiated. We call it request for proposal. What's the big difference between the two? One, invitation to bid, I know exactly what I want. Okay, here's the specs. I want you to respond to those specifications and give me your best price. Okay, I'm going to tell you I want 100 units of this, and you're going to carry across the listing, and you're going to choose and tell us. The price. A request for proposal, more negotiated. Here I'm going to say, I think I want to buy new uniforms. I don't quite know what I want though. I want you to help me out. And so I want you to propose back to me what I should be looking at. Give me some guidance. I'm going to give you a format of how I want you to tell me that so I can evaluate you compared to others, but I'm not going to be so focused on the price at this point as opposed to what you recommend. Okay. A lot of times it's the professional services and others and types of supplies are somewhat unique. Okay. And then there's some just under very simplified acquisition, more like a quote or an offer. Maybe I want pest control services. I'll show you some examples. It's 1,000 square foot building. Everybody should know what I want to do. Roach control, whatever it is. I'm being very specific. I don't have time to do an elaborate document. I just wanted you to give me a quote. You should know what I'm talking about in your field if you're an expert. Call you, and then I'm going to get that information for you. Okay. Always referring back to FAR, and we'll click on it. It's a point 2.1, 2.2.1 definitions. So they're going to want you to know if they use words, what they mean. Acquisition. Okay, they're going to define those for you. Governments are very specific and very detailed. Okay, so always refer back when they give you a reference. At the local government level, this is a city. Same terminology is used, not as formally as in the federal government. The truth of the matter is, not everybody gets to go to graduate school, and they hire people come in there, and they'll call an invitation to bid maybe an RFP or an RFI. So you kind of watch out until you get sort of the self-identifying parts, or even maybe combine it, okay? Because they're not quite sure what they want. So here, this one here is a request for bids and proposal, okay? And they're looking to actually buy some uniforms. I use that example, giving you a due date. It's going to be very specific in the way they approach it. If we click through here, we'll go to that bid. Hopefully it's still there. There you go. And you'll find that online. Okay. And in that, here they combined it. I'll show you why they combined it in a second. They're giving you a date. Everything that they really want you to know is going to be on that first page. So remember that. Always pay attention to details. Okay. If it's 3 o'clock local time, we'll figure out what local time is. Okay. That's going to be, I believe, Asheville's in Eastern. But I'm not quite sure. I might want to make sure they're not in Central. That's your responsibility. They're making you aware of that. Okay. If they tell you that you can only contact a particular individual, that is the only person you can contact. Okay. So Beatrice is the only person we want to contact in this. We're not going to call the city council individual. Say, I want to ship you a sample of these uniforms. Look how sharp they are. It's going to disqualify you. Okay. Don't want to do that. Okay. You're only not going to call the actual police department. You can call Beatrice. She's the one. At this point, you'll get ruled out if you violate any of those requirements they have on you. If they stick something and they put it in a yellow marker, then you make sure you read it. That means this is important. Okay. It's a responsibility to you to make sure that they get the bid on time. That means if you get there 3:01, you're out. Not their problem. Okay. And you're going to be required to give it to them in the method that they tell you. And after that, there you're going to start to get to specifics after you get that cover letter. Okay. And then in the specifics, some of them are going to be a little bit more elaborate, some of them not. I think this one here is 10 or 15 pages. Sometimes it's 2 pages. Sometimes I've seen one that's 1,000 pages. You get 1,000 pages there, they're being too specific, if you ask me. But it can happen. Clarity of purpose is very important. And so they're going to tell you almost always the things that you have to be most concerned about up front. They're going to tell you how they're going to pay you. They're going to tell you who to contact, and they're going to give you the laws that you got to be familiar with. And this one here, the statutes, that's kind of just like what FAR is, except that it's in North Carolina only. And so you just want to Google that, be familiar with it. We're going to give you a place to give you some details about your company, almost always. Sometimes they're going to ask you to respond back, and they're going to tell you to give them the same information. If they tell me to give them the company name, address, city, and state, then I'm going to do it in that order. I'm not going to put my address first. Okay, I'm going to put my company name, address, city, and state. Do it in the order that they tell you. Governments are very peculiar about these things. Sometimes they require you to sign a page if you've seen it in your company name. You make sure you do that. I had a client lose a $2 million award one time because they forgot to sign one of the pages. Make sure. Never leave anything blank. Okay, so if there's something they want you to respond to, you see to say, I can't respond to this, or I am responding to it. Okay, go ahead and just type in, NA, so I can't respond to it. In this particular case here, it's an invitation to bid. To start off with, they want 200 of these uniforms. They're being very specific. Okay, if I can't provide that, I need to tell them I can't, but this is what I can provide. Okay, give them unit costs, extended costs, fill them all out. Make sure you do it right. If you got a question, who are you going to call? You're not going to call the police chief. You'll call Beatrice. Okay, she's the one. Keep that information. They're going to be there to help you. They're going to have, it's like a bank of questions that they're getting. Always, and you're going through this and see how they make it very easy for you to fill out and make it you sign that you saw it. They want to make sure they treat everybody equally in the process. Okay, it's a very, very simple document to complete. Some of these I may be able to. And then I get to more of the proposal side, and they're asking for some additional proposals, maybe some badges, and some here, and other things, stars and stripes and things that you might be able to. They're not really bidding this out specifically. They want to know that you can do it. What do you recommend? Okay, and you can read through that. And then they will give you their special terms. Sometimes this is in form of a contract. Other times it's not. But if you can't live with something in this, don't expect them to change it. And it's very rare that government will ever change anything. So you should be aware of that going into it. So if you can't meet a particular term of a contract, then you need to be prepared to back away from it. Okay. And as you go through, and they're giving you, just telling you how they're going to deal with discrepancies. This particular case here, always warn folks, this is a single award. Sometimes when you fill out a document and they have 50 items on there, they can do a multiple award. You might win one item. So if that's the case, you need to make sure that your pricing structure is built in to accommodate for that. Okay. Here, if I'm sending all this, then I can make it, economies of scale there and lower my price potentially. But I might want to charge a little bit higher if it's one award at a time. Okay. So you're going through there, they're going to give you some evaluation schedule. They're going to tell you when they want to decide, how they're going to evaluate, how they're going to measure you up. Government's going to give you that information up front. Okay. And then you're going to start seeing some, non-collusion statements, things like this. These are all pretty much the same thing over and over again. You want to keep your W-9 maybe in a Google folder. You can keep some basic information about your company that's going to be always required. Once you do one of these, it's basically the same thing over and over again. Okay. So you would store, and you're going to have that available. So this is more the traditional invitation to bid. Sorry, again, go down. We also have that combined synopsis. And then, this gets governed by 5.1. This is when the opportunity is combined and it's streamlined. They're giving you all the bid documents up front, all at first. And that's at the federal level primarily. Special notice, mention business fairs, procurement estimates. Don't just let these things pass you by. Pay attention to them. This is typically the way we get business from organizations. You get to know folks. You're passing your capability statement. You're doing it in a professional way. Also giving them draft solicitations. Governments don't just invent stuff out of thin air. They're looking for you to participate. Okay, you're going to have draft solicitations, specifications. They want you to comment on them. But they want to make sure they get it right. Okay, they want your help. Here's some examples out there. What's a request for quotes? Quotes are very specific. The one I used earlier was pest control, for example. And they're telling you exactly what they want. They're going to pick up the phone, or they may want you to fax something to them. Within a couple of days, you should know exactly what they're looking for and be very precise with this. And they're probably going to have a very limited grouping that they're going to send that to. The request for information, these are more complex things like file-based electronic fax. A lot of us don't ever have a clue how these work. And we can't expect for government officials to be an expert in every particular area. They know they want an electronic fax system, send a cloud, but they're not quite sure how that really is going to work. They want you to come and tell them how you're going to do it. They want to request for information. Or even maybe a customer energy management system, engineering software tools, all a little different. But there you give it, they're not going to make that purchase up front. They may move very quickly to a purchase if you're the right company. Okay. But initially they want you to sell yourself. This is more and not so structured. Okay. Invitation to bid, request for quotes, very structured. Request for proposals, medium structured. Request for information, lightly structured. Okay, so just kind of remember the different levels. Information there just helps an agency understand the interests and capabilities of the businesses that are going to go bid. Okay, sometimes referred to as source of SALT at a local government level specifically. They just want to know that you're able to do the work. They're trying to figure out who all's there available to do that, and they want you to do that. Part 5 of FAR really speaks to that. You can kind of go through how they're going to go about publicizing it, and they'll talk to you about the different levels here. Okay, you'll see me go back and forth with FAR. That governs what government officials do. Now they work. It's like their Bible. They don't do anything that's not in FAR. That's how they lose their jobs. Okay, and each one of them has different levels of a warrant, is what it's referred to as. And so somebody can buy up to 2 million, somebody can buy up to 50 million, and they stay within that part of the FAR that they're able to work with. Okay, that's how they train. They get promoted every time. Request for qualifications, almost like a sources for SALT, primarily at the local government level. Here, they want to know who's qualified to do what they're looking to have done. This is traditionally more like engineers, people who have some specialty. And sometimes this is driven by their organization. So if I belong to the boards that give engineering degrees, then they'll come in and say, if you're working with government, we want you to have this level of qualification in order to do that, and you're not going to be able to provide this until you have that qualification. Or like this one here is a lift station generator, and you got to have the certificates in order to do the maintenance. Maybe there's some sort of certificate from a particular company in order to bid on that. And my brother's a master mechanic with Ford, and so you can come in there and you can see that. And so only those folks who have that already in place can bid. So they want those quals up front. Sometimes they'll do this at the beginning of the year, and then you get on the list, and then the government officials will call you. More informal, but it happens. These are called requests for qualifications. Okay, and this is one here for repaint of metal. They want to have somebody who has the ability to go into a jail. Most likely they have to be certified in order to go into that jail. Okay, of some sort. Justification here, we decided that we need to make this happen. We're going to make a decision on our own. These are very rare. Let's just say that 5,000 bids every day, 10 of them can be justified usually. Okay, they're not a lot of them. There's some particular reason for there, and the FAR covers it specifically. So if you want, if they want to justify for sources and supplies, it's under FAR 8.405. Okay, and so this is the only time they're able to order on the federal supply schedule for using that. Okay, so they're going to tell you exactly why. This came into more recent with COVID, and they had to move quickly. That's usually why it's compelling cases is why they use it. Unusual or compelling urgency. This is what was used over and over again. Okay, but even still, that's slowed down and somewhat rare. Okay, the sole source notification and the pre-qualification we've discussed in more general ways, but you're the only one that can provide it. Maybe you have a patent, sole source, pre-qualification. I'm going in and asking you ahead of time the same thing as a request for qualification. Then they once they get everybody in that list, then only those companies who've been pre-qualified can give them a bid. Okay, and so they'll announce those. These are our friends pre-solicitations. This is when they're giving you a heads up. Okay, sometimes it's years, sometimes it's months, sometimes it's days. Okay, they'll tell you that, and they'll notify you, and they just give you a little bit more time. Okay, this is in difference in like government actions. You'll see the word upcoming very, very often. The upcoming request, excuse me. The upcoming requests are those that we know are coming because governments they don't operate in a vacuum. I told you earlier when we were looking at the decision making that city council is talking about something, they're budgeting for it. Where we have graduate researchers who go through and read the budgets and they pull them out for pull-up projects. So if they're going to be looking at acquiring all new playground equipment, for example, in a city, they're going to budget for that at the beginning of the year. They're not going to buy it probably in the middle of the year. So we're telling you a heads up there when you're in that pre-solicitation, the pre-stage of purchase, you do have more flexibility, and you're able to go in and you're able to practice more traditional business development. Okay, so that's important to understand. There, I'm giving examples, and maybe I'm dropping my card in the mail. But once it actually goes into a contracting instrument stage, then you got to follow those rules. Okay, you're not sure, always err on the side of caution. You don't want to rule your company out because you got outside their frame, their zone of the cone of silence, what it's called sometimes. We also have out there what's referred to as a state or shared contract. Here, sometimes they'll issue at the state and local government specifically large contracts. They're basically a contract that can be used by multiple governments, and they'll tell you that going into it. They say we're going to buy towers, but whenever you give us our price, anybody in the state can buy off that contract at the same price. Okay, so be careful when you bid on those, because what's going to happen at that point is your price is going to be out there, and at the same time they don't actually have to go over bids. Everybody else will know where your bid's at, and I can go in there for $1 or $2 less per tire, and I can win that contract. I'm not a big fan of these. They don't really save. There's no proof they save money. It may save time from the ease of use, but it's not something that I think it really harms companies in some parts. But they're out there, and you'll see those. So that's sort of really the different types of contracting instruments. The most common will be that invitation to bid or the request for proposal. And you'll hear those terms: bid, bids, and RFPs. Okay, RFPs, requests for proposals. And you'll see those over and over again. So I want to move into that. So how do you really get to do work with those governments? How do you, when you see those invitations to bid and request for proposals, what's really required? We have to register with those governments. Okay. Now, most of us only register with governments once we're bidding. Okay. But there are a couple places that you need to make sure you're registering now. First, the System for Award Management, SAM.gov. It's changed over the last few years. It's become extremely complicated. It's supposed to become easier to use. Truth of the matter is, everybody's having difficulty with it. Look for additional future changes. But you got to register here if you want a federal government contract. Here, basically, it's the accounts payable system for the government, meaning that if you're in here, then you can win a federal government or a federal grant, and then you can get paid. Okay, you can't even propose for them if you're not in here. They want to have it all ready to go when you set up. So you have to set up your bank account. You got to set up make sure your corporation's in place. They're just really making sure you're legit. Okay, not so complicated once you get started. You can walk through. They will give you little tips on how to do it. But it just takes a little bit of time to get that cage number, get that DUNS or that unique identifier number, which is what are you going to now. So you want to go ahead and get that ready. In fact, you cannot bid on a federal contract unless you are in the system. At the same time, a lot of us come in and I went through that elaborate process and I'm good to go for everybody. Well, truth is, it is only good for the federal government. And it's not even good for the federal government ones where they're subsidizing, they're going down to a local government level to actually award it. So you don't, before you can win a FEMA contract, you got to be registered in SAM, but you will most likely go have to also be registered in that state or local government that you're working with. Okay, and that's the emergency grants. And when you're, or bids, when you're going through to get started on the emergency, there's going to be a spot that you just check off. Okay, and it says I want the emergency ones as well. So you're going to want to use that process to do that. Okay, and make sure you're in there if you're going to go after emergency. We should all go after and go ahead and get listed in that. I don't really quite understand the differences and why we need two databases or a subset, because everybody can potentially be eligible for emergency bids as well. They are required to, at that point, most times because of the Stafford Act, they try to work with you locally in the emergency area. But truthfully, the matter is when there's an emergency, a hurricane goes through, most of us are knocked out as a business and we can't respond right away. So be aware of that. It's a system that you got to be awarded in, but but just because you're registered there in your local area doesn't mean that you're going to be the ones working on that project. The state agencies, I always tell everybody to make sure they register in their individual state that they're in. I'm in Georgia. I want to go through and register in Georgia. So what I would do is I would go to Georgia procurement, maybe Georgia purchasing, state of Georgia, search, there it is, comes up, and I'm gonna walk through the process. Supplier, most likely, it's gonna give me some links here. I'm gonna click on it. It's gonna tell me how to register, okay? Bidder and supplier portal, there we go. And it's not that difficult. Unlike the federal government, it can take you a couple hours, a couple days. Here, it'll take you a couple minutes, maybe 20, 30 minutes, okay? Your local government, register in your largest local government in your area, county or city. Okay, so I'm in the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, one of those I'm going to choose, probably the city of Atlanta. I'm going to make sure that I'm in there, I understand how that local government works, but I'm not going to go and register with all 159 counties in Georgia. I'm not going to register with all 530 cities, or I think it's 556 now, keep scrolling. I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to register in one of those. And then if I decide to bid on, a bid in Savannah, Georgia, then I'll register that day, because it's only going to take me literally minutes at this point in time. And they're going to allow me to do that as I bid. Also going to allow me to do that in the state. So I don't have to be pre-registered. Federal government got to be pre-registered. Okay, got to be in SAM. Make sure. And I always put in there, what about those private third parties? Because you want to see, I'll show you a couple of them. If I go into, let's say, Cobb County, Georgia is going to always pick on them. Okay. Governments have a responsibility to manage their purchases. But there are third-party systems that come in, convince the government not to do that, okay? And so whenever they go in, they want to bid, they're going to go to vendor registration, and then there's going to be a third party sitting there suggesting that they have to pay in order to gain access to that site, okay? Self-service site of some sort. You do not have to pay to register with government agencies, okay? So whenever it clicks on, if I look at one of these, it's sending me to a third party. I get lost a little bit. Always choose the free option. Okay, that government's going to let you have access to the information. You don't have to pay anybody. And they're going to suggest that you have to, but you don't. Okay, so don't get caught. I call it being bidwinked. You don't want to be kind of getting hoodwinked. You're falling for it. There's probably 2,000 governments in the United States that use a third party. It just contributes to the fragmentation. There's probably 20 companies like that other. They work with the agency they work with, and then the other ones work with the ones that they work with. We don't care at Gov Directions. We're going to work with all of them. Okay, they just contribute to the fragmentation. We might send you to one of these third-party providers. You just take the free option. You don't need to pay them. Okay, that's a business ploy designed to confuse. So make sure you get that registration done. You got all those three areas. Ignore the third parties. You register as you go through there. Typically, of those 20 or so that are out there, you want to register with one of them, each of them one at a time. Okay. So once you are registered, then how do you get the business? Except for when the bids are actually out there, even when the bids are coming out, you got to have your capability statement ready to go. You got to be branded. Okay. The capability statement is very important in government contracting. And I use a quote there to kind of illustrate that. This is Alexander Haig, former general. He's famous for working with President Reagan, and then when President Reagan is shot, he says, "I'm in control." Everybody misinterprets him, but he, of course, had a very knowledgeable general. He once said, "Practice rather than preach. Make of your life an information defined by your ideals, not the negation of others, not what everybody else is saying about you. Dare to the level of your capability, then go beyond to a higher level." So here, this is your opportunity to shine. Teach about yourself, affirm who you are. Take that. You want a one-page document that's going to speak to your company. It should look and feel and sell you. It should be colorful. It should speak to specific language that might impact you. And you're going through, you're putting your DUNS number on there, maybe your cage code, maybe the NAICS codes that you're there. You're going to deal with, really the C's, your core competencies, your performance, your conservations, your reason, your clarity of your reason, differentiators. Okay, these pieces are important in your document. We have some systems that allow you to do that here. I also refer out to, there's a particular session that Dr. Cynthia Harper does that I mentioned earlier. She does an excellent job. We always refer to her. She's prepared these here for our clients, and she's there to help you. Things you can do yourself. Sometimes, though, it's helpful to have somebody who has the expertise to help pull that in. So these documents are important. You'll see whenever you go through SAM or you go through, local governments. Let me just look and see at Gov Directions how many of there have the keyword capability in it right now. They want that capability statement before you even can bid. Okay, so that's very common. Capability. Okay, and so they want to know that. Let's see, out of 50,000. Right now, I've got 2,200. They're asking for that capability statement right up front. Okay, and so whenever you click through these and you go into the actual bid, they're going to tell you that you have to send your capabilities. I should have been logged in. I haven't been on the site. Just choose one at random. Go in. SAM.gov. And so they want to know your capabilities. And they'll tell you that, to speak to that. They want that document sent to them, showing that you can do this. They want the NAICS code tied to you, so forth. Okay, very important. Get that done. And so that's important. Excuse me. And as you move forward, and that also helps you pinpoint your opportunity. This is the second part of this. It's finding, finding that bid. And I use Coldplay. There's a song. You're the one that I wanted to find. That's the one we want. We don't want to just be scattered. We want to know exactly the bid that we want to bid on. So each of us really needs to fully understand our marketplace. The capability statement helps you define your marketplace. You'll see some of them. I see somebody just asked me, I do housing services, city services. Can I also put on their social service? Yes, you can be in that same marketplace. At the same time, though, I might do something completely different. Maybe I sell widgets of some sort, and I'm also doing sitting. I don't want to confuse those, so I may even need a capability statement for two different ones. Okay, know your marketplace, where you're going to pursue, so you can frame your company in the right way, and then learn indicators of success. Which one of these bids am I? If I go after, am I actually going to win? Why am I going to win it? What really makes me different? This is your differentiators and your past performance tied together. Okay. So for example, on our contract, I have found that I do the best with organizations, maybe cities, typically between maybe 5,000 and 25,000 in population. Okay. If I see a 30,000, I may consider it, knowing that I might not win it. Okay. My indicator of success decreases. And in addition, on the bottom level, I don't even want to go bid on these because they're not really in that level that makes sense for me financially. So it will be 5,000 to 30,000 potentially. So whenever I see the city of Atlanta with 200,000, 300,000 people, I'm not even going to worry about it. It's not worth it. Maybe occasionally I might say, okay, I'll just go for it. I'll shoot out there, and I'm knowing I'm not probably going to win. Okay. Know what those indicators are. Only you know your company. You're going to understand that as you go along. I have found that I do well and I win these contracts, and I win them at a 67% rate once I focus in on the ones that I really can win. and the marketplace that I'm in. And you do that through your Gov Directions account settings. You want to focus on those particular categories that you're in. And then when you look at those, very quickly, you're going to be able to see the population and see where it's at geographically. These are all things that can be part of your indicator of success, all the way from, whether or not the quantity is 10 to 10 million. You may not be able to go over 50, then you're going to know that very quickly in your account settings and tie those. And so for the request for proposal, when you're looking at it, it's going to define all these indicators that you can really start collecting, okay? And in that bidding process, you're going to be able to read it. So when you open one up, you need to know what it looks like and what it feels like, so that you know where to go in order to very quickly see if it's something that you really want to pursue. And so you'll know if it's the one you were supposed to find. It is supposed to be hard. Okay, if it were easy, everyone would do it. Okay, so don't let these elaborate documents, I've seen those many, 1,000 pages, don't let them scare you off. Okay, you can do it. It's going to be a part of it. It's going to really be defined by your company and what you do. The remaining document itself, it's going to be the same laws and rules and regs that they have to follow. Most of these are some obscure things that you never have to worry about. Okay, they've got to put it in the document because they've been legislating mandated to do so. But this quote here by Tom Hanks, A League of Their Own, it was a movie about a softball team. They got to practice. They had to get out there, and they had to. It's hard to be a winner, but once you start winning, you keep winning. So when you see an RFP, know that these are the parts that you're going to be looking at. First, there's going to be a statement of work. This is a clarity of purpose. This is really why they're looking to hire you, why they want to hire you. Okay. And so read that first. It's going to be short and concise. I literally make students practice this over and over again. Get it in a paragraph format. Get everything you need to do. Don't use any extra words. Use good writing skills. I'm going to tell you to do the same thing. It's called ABCs of technical writings. It's brevity, clarity, and accuracy. So you start with accuracy, making sure you're accurate in everything you request. Be brief. Be specific, okay, and then clarity. Make sure you speak specifically to what they're looking for. Don't wander off into other areas. You can get this. It's going to be disqualifying. You're going to do that in the technical specs. If they're going to be very precise. If they miss something as a government, it's not really your responsibility to go back in and tell them that. Okay, you can ask questions potentially. I don't even ask questions when questions to answer. I speak specifically to what they're looking for. If I have an idea to make some change to something to the specs, I'm not going to even talk about that until I get my foot in the door. Okay, and then you can talk to them and say, hey, this was good 3 years ago, but things have changed. I'm on top of it, and I'm here to tell you that your specs are a little bit off, and we want to change them with you. Schedule. Make sure you can speak to the schedule. That's going to drive everything. If you can't, always call them on schedule as well, meaning that what I'm giving them in the back of the proposal, they got to decide within so many days, usually 90 days. Things can change. I got caught with COVID on a couple of projects, and prices went up. Things happened. I couldn't get there. Details like that. And so I wanted to make sure I have a call on that and speak to that. And then I can perform. If I can't perform something in schedule, I need to tell them that up front, or I need to bypass it. It's better to let something go than to try to do something you can't actually meet the expectations of. That'll harm you. And it's important that you not harm yourself. Your list of deliverables, they're going to actually tell you what they want you to do, okay, in each of those. And this is what you're going to provide. You're not going to offer them extras, okay? You can't provide it, you're going to tell them. Don't leave anything open for guests, okay? Go into every contract with your eyes wide open and be ready to deliver what they've asked you to do. And if there's something they're potentially saying, maybe you have to deliver this, then you say, well, maybe if I do, then this is the price maybe level. Okay, so we want to be very specific in how we approach things. Contract terms and conditions. Make sure you understand you got to work with their contract. You're not going to convince a city attorney or county commissioner, a county attorney or state's attorney to make any changes. So don't expect them to go into it with full understanding. If they don't speak to a contract, slide one in. Okay, go ahead and give them your contract, but know that government's going to bring their own to the table. The format of the proposal, here is their attempt to get everything lined up so they can compare them against each other for comparative purposes. So always speak to their format, and you're going to have a sample that you will probably develop over time. Make sure you adjust that to each organization. So if they want, experience first, then put it first. If they want experience last, then put it last. Okay, so they'll tell you what they want, that how they want that sent back. Sometimes they want the cost set up in a sealed envelope separate. Make sure you don't include it. Okay, they'll disqualify you. Always follow their format. Qualification experience. Hey, you got to be ready to go with this, folks. I get this question the most. I don't have any experience, and I'm really ready to laugh because no one out there is going to create their own company, okay, and not be ready to go. So you've done something. You may not have won a government contract before, then that's different. But you come into your business, you're a subject matter expert for some reason. You're there for on a purpose. And most of, I'm not going to just go out and claim to be a mechanic when I literally cannot do any mechanic skills whatsoever. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, but in compensation management, this is something I studied. I worked as a subcontractor for a number of years. I formed my own company, and when I did that the first time, I had no contract that was specific that was in my name, but I had some as an individual, as a subcontractor, or as a student, or I had some references, and so I spoke to that. And I sold myself, and that's what you do with your qualification and experience. Now, as I go along, I have 400 different contracts. Then I'm going to speak to that in a different way, and I'm going to focus on some that are common to that organization who's asking for me to respond. So it could be a regional representation, it could be the same size, something that's some commonality. So I'm going to speak to that in a different way. But be ready to go with your qualification experience. And once again, this should match what's on that capability statement. You really got to set yourself with that document. Cost breakdown, know how to do performance research. There's two different types of performance research. One is that here's what I have done in the past and this is how I perform. Here's my client base. The other is here's what the market is demanding for pricing structure. And I call that cost performance. And so you go in and you look and see what your competitors are doing, and then you're able to make some estimations of where you need to be at. Government contracting is different. You don't want to leave too much money on the table, and you certainly don't want to be too far off because you'll never get the contract. But you don't always have to be the low cost provider. The number one thing that governments want to know is that first, you have the qualification and experience to do what they want and deliver it in the time that they need it, and that you're going to meet their statement of work. Because they want to go back to that city council and say, wow, look what I did, and look what this contractor helped me do. And that's going to be going to help them in their own professional career, and it's going to in their goals and objectives. And so that's important to do. And so that's why you always have to really focus in on. And the first thing I oftentimes look at, the first thing I always look at is statement of work. Okay. The second thing I look at is evaluation criteria. How are they going to evaluate me? Okay, I want to make sure that I understand that going into it. I use that term eyes wide open. Understand what they're expecting from me and whether or not I can do it. And then some of them, if there's something very strong, if they really are 90% low cost, they don't want to hire me. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to move on, because what we're going to do is we're going to deliver them a good product at a good price, and it's going to be a fair relationship between both parties. So you kind of know that going into these. So I'm going to give you an example of one that I saw recently. This happened in January of last year, right before the pandemic. It was in Carter County, Tennessee. It happened actually probably in the fall of the year before. And then they got to the stage of actually hiring in January. But here they wanted to have an RFP for a comprehensive classification study, something I do. This is a profession that I'm in, I've trained to do, and I do one of the few subject matter experts in the country in this topic. So I wanted to bid on it. And there's not a lot of these contracts out there, but they're good services. You go in, you help governments determine how to pay people. So I read through it, and initially, let's just go and look at the real one, okay? And I'm going to give you these tips afterwards. Let me just go in and pull that out. Oops, got a couple windows open here. So here's the request for proposal. Okay, they issue it, looking at it in a PDF format. Close this off so you can get a bigger view. Okay, I'm gonna read through it, and they're looking to hire somebody. Right away in that first paragraph, the purpose is right up my alley. It's what I want to do. And the second paragraph, they start telling me a little bit about the government, and I'm working with the finance department. My background is public finance. I think I'm gonna get along with these folks. It starts becoming more appealing. So as I'm going through this, I'm looking at some indicators of success. One of those is their finance. That's good for me. I know that when I work with a finance department, I got a high shot. The other is that it's going to be the type of study they're looking for. Just a compensation study it's really right up there. If they're looking at a more comprehensive total compensation study, other words that may throw it out for me, I'm not really interested. Okay, so they're here, there. And then they give me a date. And this one here, they forgot to put in the date because they had it sort of designed, but then we called them, they released it, typed it in, but it was in a time period that I could do the work and I would be able to meet their expectations and start pulling out things and looking at it. And it's going to be 10 copies of the proposals, understanding that I'm going to start adapting what I'm going to do to them. Okay, I'm reading through it at first, read through the entire document before I do anything. These are common things. I'll go send it to them, 10 copies, not 20, 10. Okay. Seal proposal, they want it sealed, they want an outside of it with certain words. Picking up on these things, I'm jotting notes down as well as I'm going through very common things. They give me an introduction, they're going to give me some details, a background about the company, their organization. In this particular case, they have a population of 56, a little bit outside my wheelhouse normally, but it's a county government. So counties are a little bit different than cities, so I have a different criteria. This is about a small to medium sized county government in a part of the country that I'm used to. I can work in and I like, and there's a lot of, I'm at a point in this type of work that I really want to go someplace I'd like to go. And this is very close to Bristol, Tennessee, so that's a good community. And so there's 256 full-time employees, 42 part-time, right in my wheelhouse, what I'm doing. So I'm circling, making sure I understand this. They're looking at different departments. Most of the folks are in general administration. I typically work in general administration, so I'm looking at these details, going through, I'll find something I'm not really familiar with. Here's what the scope, what they want to do. I do have somebody, a subcontractor that I can work with, or sometimes, or my boss in this particular case, he does this. And so I'm making notes. I'm going to talk to him about this, but they do want this benefit package. It wasn't in the title. Not something I quite like to do, but I can overcome that with the group. I also noticed once again, I'll be working with this financial management committee. I spoke before, all kinds of financial management committees across the country. I'm going to do a good job whenever I do this. Okay. And then they will give me the deliverables. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of those. I'm going to be able to meet all of these. I've already looked at them, and I'm not going to throw in all these additional things that they might not be looking for just yet. When I get in the door and they start asking me questions, at that point I might start throwing in some different versions of the way you might want to do it. For example, we do Zoom calls now. I could say, hey, well, you might want me on site, but if you do a Zoom call, I can cut my price down. It's not going to be, it's going to save you a couple grand. Okay, I might throw that out separately, but not initially. Okay, the insurance requirements. You'll start getting some details at this point. You'll see some common things. I'm going to have my insurance requirement, my insurance document in a Google Drive that I'm going to call attention to. My W-9 is going to be ready to go. My certificate of insurance probably is going to be very common. In fact, it is. It's a $1 million policy, $5 million level. And so that's, if I had one that was less, maybe I had $500,000 to 2.5, then in this case here, I might not go out and buy it. I might say to them in my proposal back that, yeah, you're asking for this, here's what I've got, but I've got a letter from my insurer provider that if you hire me, then they'll move me up to this additional level. But I want to put up that extra couple grand just to bid on your project, and they'll do that for you. Okay, so those are some exceptions there. The proposal format here, they're going to tell me how they want to submit it. I've already got my proposals in a Google Drive, all these parts set up, an overview of our history, all of my references, all these things are going to be there. I'm just going to need to put it in a way, in the method. So the very first part of it, I'm going to do an overview of my company. Then I'm going to talk about experience. And then I'm going to talk about a work plan. Then I'm going to talk about expectations. I'm going to do it in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 step process. So that cost proposal will be the 9th part of it. Okay. And I'm not going to change it around because I want to do it my way. I'm going to do it their way. Okay. Here, they're going to give me a selection process. Yeah, really catching my attention. How are they going to decide if I'm the right one? So they've got this independent review that's been done by somebody, the third party. I might give you some research there, but eventually, though, they're going to tell me that the finance committee is going to be the ones to decide, and they're going to make a recommendation to the county commission, and then they're going to hire you and get started. So I'm going to start at this point. Yeah, I'm interested. And I'm going to propose back, but I'm going to start bookmarking where I need to be watching to see where this discussion is occurring on the internet, because everything's broadcast these days. It's going to be a meeting potentially where they talk about this. Not going to do it in the dark of the night. You're going to do it in the open. And I'm going to start learning about these folks. I might go in, I want this deal. I'm going to learn about that county commission. and know those folks' names and know what they do, what they look for. So whenever I actually do get into the door, that I'm gonna be able to pitch in a very good way and be ready for that. You're gonna give me some, at this point, I'm gonna start talking about, you gotta follow the law, you gotta pay your taxes. Details, they're gonna be the same thing over and over again. I'm gonna read through it, but I'm gonna recognize most of the stuff is just, it's this boilerplate. And I'm not going to change it, so I just got to be familiar with it. Okay, so what is this 7-page document? So yeah, so that's that was a really appealing. This is actually really a contract I really felt like I could get, and I decided to pursue it. And so so I just gave some tips. First off, I read the entire proposal all the way through. Okay, I paid attention to the areas that you and I have already discussed. I did set it aside and thought about it, and I talked to my wife today. Should I pursue this? But I also talked to my colleagues and said the ones who are going to go in the process with me, and just make sure it's a good fit. And it is. It was a good contract listing that I would like to have gotten. I don't do a lot of it in Georgia. Don't do a lot of business in Tennessee though. I typically do a lot of business out west and South Carolina, Virginia, not in Tennessee. A little harder to break into for a variety of reasons. And then I actually decided to sit down and go, yeah, I'm going to respond to this and prepare a response. And so when I do that, I actually go out and do some performance research too. And then there, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna know my competition. I'm gonna look and see who's downloading this document on that government website. It's typically available. I'm gonna maybe go out and do some analysis. USAspending.gov is gonna have some statistics that are out there. If you're not familiar with this site, get used to it. USAspending.gov basically shows you all the purchase orders for governments. So if you're selling widgets, supplies, you just click through your word search. Keyword search, let's sell trucks. Search, show me 235,000 recent truck buys. Maybe you want to get very specific, do semi trucks. I don't know. The quotes, always quotes when you do any specific words. That's the, oh, now down to 134. Okay. So I'm getting to real live statistics that I can use. And then I can open up the longer ones. Going to be a full contract. The W is the first one. Okay. And I'm gonna be able to go in here and I'm gonna see these bids. I'm gonna know what that 722,000 is tied back to. Other ways to do performance research, I've got directions. Go back to the directions here. You can see who's winning certain projects we have here. You can go in and you can start looking at some of these details and the ones you pull up. This one, for example, just as an example. I think go in and I can look at the original site. Or I might be looking at different governments. I can see what everybody has bid. On this one, this is a competitive. This was a COVID-19 related activity. A lot of people are going after PPE for valves. And so this one won this at $12,005, 2.5 cents each. Everybody else bid the same way. I always like to point this one out because somebody bid $70,000 for the exact same thing. Okay, that's a big difference. And then maybe this was a gold rim. I don't know. At the same time, this one here, they left a lot of money on the table. The last one that's closest to it, I think I saw was 17.5. They had $5 grand on the table. You don't want to do that either. They bought the business more or less. Okay, maybe not even able to actually provide the product at the end of the day. And this one actually is even less than that because they did 50 wipes here and they did 80 wipes there. Okay, so you want to go out there and you want to look at your competition, see what everybody's bidding, so that you can come back in and give an analysis. And the way you do that, I'll show you this one here. But you go in, you look at your write down your competitors, 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and how many's out there, what they're bidding. It's going to be some sort of common numerator there that you can use to compare. Okay. In my field, it's going to be number of employees, most likely. So the total price divided by number of employees, but here it's per unit. You get your mean, the mean is the average. And then maybe your range, high, low, play with your mean, make sure your mean and your median. Median's the midpoint. As a reminder, make sure those are close. And then that's going to tell you kind of where you need to be at. So if I really want this work, I want to bid, in the lower range. If I'm not quite sure that I want it, maybe I will do it if they pay me the right price. I'm not going to higher range. Or maybe I'm really good at what I do. I am. And confidence, always have confidence. I'm going to bid a little higher. They won't work with me. They won't have to pay the price. Okay. So whenever I go out there to actually prepare the proposal, let me go ahead and show you the actual proposal. Let me just go ahead and minimize that. So I prepare the actual proposal, come in, we do this under a different name and got directions, for example, because I'm in there as a subcontractor. I've been working with the same firm. And we want to do them a cover letter. Always speak to a cover letter, even if they don't ask for it. Give them an affirmation of what you said in the document. You need a first paragraph, clarity of purpose. This is what I'm doing. Second, this is why you need to hire me. This is my experience. And third is elaborate. This is technical writing, ABCs. Okay. You can find help with this. Skunk and White has a book called The Elements of Style. Very one you should be familiar with. Not, read some small things. Don't use the same word twice in any sentence. Small things. Learn your style. And you're going in there, and then how to get in touch with you. Then you have your RFP, and I'm gonna have prepared it and say it in the manner that they told me to do it. I give them a table of contents. They can browse through it very easily. They wanted my experience first. Here's a profile. Here I am right there. I'm coming as an independent contractor on this one. Finance, I'll mention that because those are finance guys. Okay. And then I'm gonna go in, give my references. This case here, I don't have one in Tennessee, but I have similar sized counties that we've done. Here's one county, another, almost identical counties. But what happens is, birds of the same feather flock together. And so they go to their conferences, they're going to meet individuals. It's likely, I'm going to have a higher likelihood of a success if they're going to know somebody they can call or converse with. They're going to feel comfortable doing that. Okay. And so you want to focus in on that. My references, listing them one by one. I've got a lot of references. Okay. But the truth of the matter is, put a lot more than I probably would in something like this because in Tennessee, you only got one. So I don't want to, I want to overwhelm them with some others potentially because I don't have that. Okay. And then I'm going to give them the details about my qualifications again, ask for that. And then I'm going to give them a summary of what I'm actually going to be able to do. And then I'm going to go through it and so details here, project understanding, gave them a contract back, and then giving them a calendar like they asked for, and then the cost that they asked for. In this case here, I did 44.5. Okay, very straightforward, 23-page document. I did one the other day, they want 10 pages, only gave them 10 pages. Sometimes they want 3 pages, only give them 3 pages. Okay, don't give them 50 pages when they specifically said they only want 10 pages. Okay, so make sure you know that you go in there. In addition, I've done the statistics. I know that I'm on the higher end of this range, but I'm not going to be the highest. And I'm definitely not going to be the lowest. And there's reasons for that. Okay. And so as I go in, my work, as in the process of doing this, I had so many days to get it done. As always, work expands so as to fill the time available for completion. So they ask, you got 20 days to do it, take the 19 days. Okay, get it. Don't give it to them early. And if you only got 3 days, make it work. Okay, so you got to be ready to go on these things, but don't file it early because there could be some amendments, there could be some addendums, and you want to be able to vote. This is Parkinson's law. Always work to understand that. Okay, and so here's that response. I sent that back. I spoke to you about the accuracy, the brevity, the clarity. Just reiterate that over and over again. Keep that in your mind anytime you're writing. And then I want to go in and do the evaluation and award. How are they actually going to decide? And I looked at those in the document itself. And frankly, what I have done in this particular case here, I've sat around with others. We evaluated the proposal because I'm going before a committee, and anytime you get 4 or 5 people together, they want to evaluate the same way. Okay, so let them take a look at your document, your friends, put them in a setting and ones you really want to get, and let them go ahead and evaluate it before it's sent in. And then you can know where you might need to make some changes or some clarifications. Choose people at random. Government officials are typically not experts in everything. So your average group of folks that you pull together will be the same. Okay. In this particular here, they actually started talking about it. I started watching the sessions that they had at Carter County, Tennessee. So if you go to Carter County, Tennessee, let's go look. I'm gonna start Googling. There it is. Now I'm going to go to it and I'm going to make sure. You should be looking at the same screen where I'm doing that. Yeah, okay. Making sure. I'm going in and look, sorry. I'm finding it and I'm at the government part. I'm going to look at the county commission. Here's the commissioners minutes. Here's the commissioners and meeting videos. Maybe start there. Here are the individual meetings. So I'm gonna start watching because they're gonna do everything in public. I'm gonna see when these things come out, the minutes, the agendas. They're gonna tell me when they're talking about it. I'm gonna have a due date. Oh, I know some of these people now because I did present to them. Got to know them a little bit better. And so you going in there, you're not so foreign anymore. The good thing about Zoom is really able to show you these folks in a public setting. They always have their images on. That's important to political leaders, and not so much for us here in the process. And you don't necessarily, you can usually attend some of the meetings online before you go. So they don't have to know that. These are all public sessions. Okay. So I'm started watching it. And then I found this document where they actually released it on the internet, and it's a scoring rubric of how they actually scored it. So, and they put all companies next to each other, and then they had what they were looking at, number of years, some of clients, things they spoke about in that RFP. And I immediately picked out my bid. First of all, I did it because I knew the price that I did. Okay, so I figured it out. They sort of blackened things out. They darkened it out. There's a favorite movie of mine where the women who helped with the astronauts get to the moon to begin with. I think her name is Friends. I forget her exact name, but she's certainly somebody we're all admire. But she picks up the document, looks up in the lights. Oh, this is how I learned about all these details, because they've been blackened out or marked out, and then you can see it. And that's what you can actually see there. You can see our name there. Okay, and that's what I was most concerned with. Then I look at the other 2, 3, 4, 5. Not the top, but we were close to it. That was 46. Top end of these other years, but those others were got lower score. We got the high score, even though we were next to the highest in price. Okay, so then I start looking at what they actually were looking for. Employee involvement was big. We do our number of years in service and so forth. Okay, but number 2, I immediately picked out that frankly, it's the lowest cost. So they threw that in there because that was important to me apparently. Okay, and they made some other notes in here. So you want to do this research. It's your individual research. Because what's going to happen when you do an RFP or initially, you want to learn why you didn't win something. Okay. And in this case here, go ahead and tell you, I did not win this bid or this proposal. And I want to tell you why. Okay. Because we had the highest price. We had the highest rating, 50. So we should initially want it. But then they started talking in a public setting, go back. And so I started reading the committee meeting minutes. Okay. And learning. And so the first one I picked up on was back in November. I submitted it in October, and in November they got their first review, and then they started looking at the details. And they talked about other things because this was in a finance committee, and they start talking about what they're looking for, and so forth, and other topics of the day. But here's the RFP for salary study. So I read through that, and they talk about the differences between the low end to the higher end, low end there, a competitor. Being the cheapest. I like that word a lot because they really are the cheapest, not necessarily least expensive, because there's a difference in quality. Hopefully not listening, but this is a competitive situation. And so you want to be able to build out why is their pricing so different than ours? This is the same services, and we do something a little different. This will give a shelf life of about 10 years, whereas the other one's about 3 years. So when I go in there, I need to make them think in terms of that. So truthfully, at the end of the day, ours is less expensive, but it's presented in a different way. And they don't really know that because this organization probably been out for this particular service once in maybe 15 years. Okay. And so they don't quite know those details, and you got to be able to sell that. Now, they may not be the same if they're buying the same thing over and over again. Traditionally, they're going through a low price situation. Okay. And who's the players, they always speak to that in their information, and they voted to actually invite us to come in and interview in January. Okay, and so they went out, they invited us, and then so they came back, and then they talked about it again in December and said, hey, yeah, they're coming in, got some more details. They got the scoring rubric. This is where I found the scoring rubric at this point in time, because they actually called at this point and said, hey, we've narrowed you down. We want you to come in. Can you come in January 6th? So I said, yes, we'll be glad to do that. It was right before COVID, and we went out and we did that. I went in there and made a proposal. When I went there, I did a good job. I really did. I really felt like we should have won that contract. We went into the room. The other organization did not come though, and there was a reason for that. And so I went back and we failed to get the contract. And so I looked back later on, and I wanted to see the minutes, because in a meeting like this, they're not going to tell you that up front. And you're not even going to hang around to see what your competitor's doing. You're there to make your presentation. You're going to speak to what you were able to do specifically, and you're going to talk about it, and you're going to listen to them. And I did that there. And so in the study, they actually talk about it in the meeting notes. So the first company went first, and they talked about it. And they did they start getting some details. And we're taking notes, and they write down things that are, this is probably an hour-long presentation, and then they take up almost a full paragraph to tell you something. Then you should read into that and understand. But they had a close family member who was at a medical procedure and was close in the community and knew this person that was on the county commission and really bought into some familiarity with the sales process. And any of us who are in sales, you know how helpful that can be, or damaging if you're not the one who's doing it. So, but really got that personal tie in, and that gave a second. So it left me sort of at an end because this was a sad situation, and then I had to win them over. And so then I come in and make a more formalized presentation. I honestly say I've never practiced that sort of sales technique, and I've always been straight up. I believe in that, and it spoke specifically. People really liked us, and even though we were the highest price, and you can read through here, there's no negative comments. It's all about they did exactly what they said they would do. But then as they get into the detail, it really comes down to the fact that the pricing was lower, and there was folks in the community that knew them, and so that's why they got the contract. So they did. I didn't feel like I wasted any time on this. It was an exercise that I went through, and I got very close to winning it, and so I felt good about that. So sometimes when you go through and you read these kind of situations, and anytime anybody critiques you, take it into consideration. Not all the time do you need to make any changes. I teach this course at a graduate level. Students are provided opportunity to be honest, and sometimes they give you suggestions, and that's what I do. I take them as suggestions. I have yet to make any changes to my teaching style or to what I'm going to do, because a lot of times they want it their way, and that's not. I have to do it in a way that fits everybody in that committee, everybody in that room, and you learn over time. Now, at the same time, if they say, this guy was just crazy, he couldn't answer this particular question, then you need to understand that and move through that and work with that. But I do like to always use an example of a failure, because I do believe that experience is the best teacher. Einstein said that. You got to really get in there and make these things happen. And so what I tried to do with you today, I know it's a little bit long and I talk fast, and you can come back. We'll put this up on the Gov School library, so you can watch it later. But we talked about Government 101, got into a focus topics about contract instruments, about registrations, about capability statements, how to pinpoint opportunity, what an RFP actually looks like, how to go back through and price things. Importance also of your own performance, making sure that you present that in terms of your qualifications, given a response, and then evaluation and award. Always reflecting back on why you win things and what you don't win things. And I would encourage you to keep that list, in a Google Drive of some sort, maybe an Excel spreadsheet, and you always refer back to those. Every one that you've applied to, the ones even that you looked at and you decided not to apply to, keep them there. Know why you didn't do that. Start building analytics that can help you in your winning process, and you'll win more bids. I mean, I have no doubt in saying that to you. So make sure you do watch those. And frankly, I've got to a point where sometimes I can't even remember all the ones I've worked on. There's been so many of them over time. The ones in 2000, these type projects come out every 3 to 7 years. I'm bidding on projects I didn't even realize I would bid on before again. And it's helpful that you know that going into it. So that's where I can refer back to. Maybe it's because I'm getting a little older, but it's also because time has a way of making you forget things. And once again, the only source of knowledge is experience. Get in there, start bidding, and you'll have success. You'll find success. I want to thank you for listening to me today. You also should have the ability to contact us. Our phone number is at the top of the website. It's 800-492-8523. And you can give us a call with questions that you might have. I'll always try to help you. If you're not LinkedIn with me on LinkedIn, do so. I answer questions from clients all the time. But I'm going to stop there and give you a chance to ask specific questions with the open microphone. I want you to recognize that this is a recorded version. So what I'm going to do right now is stop the recording.